No one expected the sky to change that night. It was supposed to be simple, predictable, almost boring. Just another interstellar object passing through the quiet lanes of our solar system, a frozen traveler from somewhere far beyond our imagination. But the universe rarely follows our plans. And 3I/Atlas was about to prove that. For months, astronomers across the world tracked it the same way they track everything else out there, with patience, with precision, and with the comfort of old math. Its path was clean, its speed was steady, its silence was normal. A perfect visitor, something you could almost forget about. But then, something changed. It began with a tiny wobble, so small that at first, most people ignored it. Maybe it was a software glitch, maybe a bad reading, maybe just the telescope having a bad night. But the wobble didn't go away. Instead, it grew, not in size, but in meaning. One scientist described it like this: it was the kind of shift you'd only see if something or someone nudged it. And suddenly, the quiet observatories watching this faint speck of light felt less like workplaces and more like front-row seats to something they couldn't explain. Because the sky had just whispered, "Look closer." When you think about space, you think about rules. Gravity pulls, mass bends space. Objects drift in a straight line unless something forces them to change direction. These laws don't break, they don't bend. They don't wake up one morning and decide to do something different. But 3I/Atlas did. As it drifted past the ecliptic, the thin, invisible sheet where most planets orbit, its path curved, not a big curve, not something dramatic, just a small, deliberate shift, like the faintest flick of a wrist, the kind of motion that shouldn't exist in space unless something caused it. And that is what scared people. Because when you look deep into the universe, you expect distance, coldness, nothingness. You don't expect behavior. In the following days, the data streams grew heavier. More observatories tuned in. More eyes watched. Every night, the shift became a little clearer. And every morning, confusion grew a little louder. People tried to make sense of it. Some blamed the sun's radiation. Some blamed outgassing, tiny jets of gas shooting from the object's surface. Others said it was just a coincidence. But deep down, everyone could feel it. This movement wasn't random. It wasn't chaotic. It was controlled, almost like the object was correcting itself, staying balanced, holding a perfect line only it could see. And that idea, the idea of control, is what kept scientists awake, staring at their screens long after midnight. Because an object from outside our solar system shouldn't be doing that. There is something eerie about watching something that shouldn't respond. Respond, like watching a statue blink, like hearing your house breathe at night. That's what this shift felt like. A blink from a distant traveler we had labeled harmless, a breath from something older than our entire species. Some scientists said, quietly, when no one else was listening, "What if we're not tracking it? What if it's tracking us?" Of course, no one believed that. Not officially, not publicly. But fear doesn't always need to be spoken to exist. Sometimes it just lives in the room, sitting in the empty chair beside you. And that fear grew stronger with each new calculation. Because the shift wasn't just strange. It was too precise, too soft, too perfect to be an accident. Something was guiding this object. Something was steering it. By the end of the week, the data was undeniable. One astronomer described it like watching a boat drift with the tide, then suddenly steer against it. A movement too intentional to be natural. Still, no one could explain what caused it. There were no planets nearby. No gravitational wells strong enough to pull it sideways. No visible jets or eruptions. Just this tiny, quiet defiance of everything we know about motion. And the more we stared, the more it stared back. There's a strange feeling that washes over you when you realize something you once saw as an object might be something more. Every frame of data, every chart, every late-night reading felt like it was pointing to the same unspoken truth. This wasn't just a rock, but the world didn't know this yet. To the average person, 3IATLAS was still just another scientific footnote, a name on the screen, a dot in the dark. No headlines, no breaking news, no panic. But inside observatories, researchers whispered to each other in hallways, shared late-night emails, made calls they didn't want traced, because they all felt the same tension under the surface. A question too dangerous to ask out loud. What force could bend an interstellar object this far from the sun? And the more they looked, the more that question grew teeth. Because the answer, whatever it was, didn't belong to any natural law we know. It belonged to something else, something hidden, something quiet, something intelligent enough to guide a visitor through the darkness between stars. And if that was true, then maybe this wasn't just a shift in motion. Maybe it was the first sign of something bigger. Something that had been moving toward us long before we ever noticed. Something that was now finally turning our way. As the chapter closes, the scientists still don't understand what they're seeing. The public has no idea what's unfolding above their heads, and the object continues drifting, quietly, as if waiting. And somewhere inside that silence sits the first mystery. A shift that shouldn't exist, caused by something we can't see, moving toward a truth we are not ready to face. And this is only the beginning. Sometimes the truth doesn't show up in a loud explosion. Sometimes it appears in something so small, so gentle, that most people never notice. This is one of those moments. Because the first sign that 3I/Atlas wasn't what we thought didn't come from a photograph, or a radar scan, or some dramatic telescope glitch. It came from a quiet curve on a screen, a line rising and falling like the slow breath of something alive. A light curve. And it didn't match anything we knew. On the first night, the data looked almost harmless. Just soft waves of brightness, dipping and glowing as the object drifted through the dark. To a tired researcher, it probably looked like nothing. Maybe a tiny rotation, maybe a bit of dust reflecting sunlight. That's what everyone assumed. Until the second night. Because the same gentle wave returned, in the exact same shape, same timing, same slope, same rise, same fall. Perfectly repeated, almost too perfect. It was the kind of curve you'd expect from a machine with a steady pulse, not a rock traveling through space for millions of years. And that's when things got strange. Across observatories, the whispers started. Are you seeing this too? This can't be rotation. It's too smooth. There's no dust cloud large enough to do this. Each scientist thought they were alone with this question, but they weren't. Because that night, the world's telescopes agreed on one thing. 3I/Atlas was sending back a pattern, a rhythm, a beat, like a lighthouse blinking across the sea of space. But no ocean existed out there, only the cold and something that refused to act natural. When you plot the brightness of a normal comet or asteroid, it looks messy. A jagged line, little spikes, small dips, nothing smooth. Nothing controlled, but the curve from 3I/Atlas, it moved like a heartbeat. Clean, soft, repeating with a calmness that felt unnatural. Every rise had the same height, every fall had the same drop. Like someone or something was dimming the object on purpose. And when patterns repeat this perfectly in space, you start to wonder, is this an accident or a signal? That question echoed through late-night labs like a quiet warning. By night 3, denial became a little harder, because the same curve appeared again and again and again. 5 nights in a row, the light curve behaved like a perfect loop. It was too precise for dust, too synchronized for rotation, too stable for sunlight scattering off an uneven surface. It felt like the object was breathing in a way no object should. Imagine the universe blinking, slowly, deliberately, as if trying to get your attention. That's what these scientists were watching. Not randomness, not chaos, but intention. The deeper they zoomed in, the stranger the details became. Each rise lasted exactly the same number of seconds. Each fall mirrored it with almost no error. One astronomer even joked, though no one laughed, "This thing has better timing than our lab clocks." And that's when fear quietly entered the room. Because clocks, rhythms, repeating pulses, these aren't natural. They're made. Something that old, that far, that untouched by any known force shouldn't be able to create a perfect rhythm. Not unless it wanted to. Not unless someone, or something, built it that way. Soon, more observatories joined the watch. Japan, Chile, India, Europe, tiny backyard telescopes run by amateurs, all capturing the same impossible pattern. Every chart looked identical, every line overlapped. Like the object wasn't just flashing, but performing. Keeping time, following rules we didn't write. And that repetition did something to people. It made them listen. Because nature is messy, but intelligence loves patterns. Around the 6th night, someone tried breaking the pattern. Just to see. They pointed telescopes at new angles, tracked it with different filters, adjusted sensitivity and exposure times. But no matter what changed, the object pulsed the same. Even when they shifted their instruments at random intervals, 3I/Atlas kept its rhythm, unbothered, unaffected, almost like it didn't care how we watched. It only cared that we watched. And with every passing hour, the idea that this object was just another rock slowly faded away. The silence around it grew louder. The pulse inside it grew stronger. Something was shaping this light, bending it, controlling it, something with purpose. By the end of the week, the entire scientific team faced a truth they didn't want to say out loud. This wasn't a natural light curve. This was choreography, a pattern with intention. A rhythm that didn't come from spinning dust or reflected sunlight, but from something deeper, something hidden inside the object's core. One researcher put it in the simplest words possible. It's like the object is talking, and we're just learning the language. Another whispered, This looks like artificial modulation. That word, artificial, sat heavy in the room. No one wanted to claim it, but no one could deny it either. Because at some point, patterns stop being coincidences, they become signatures. And maybe that's what this was, a signature. As the chapter closes, the mystery only thickens. The light curve continues its soft heartbeat, untouched by time or distance. The object drifts silently through the night, blinking like a cosmic signal waiting for someone brave enough to answer. And the biggest question of all hangs over them like a shadow. Who or what controls the rhythm? Because objects drift, rocks spin, dust reflects. But this felt alive, and deep down, everyone watching knew. If the light is lying, something else is telling the truth. And that truth is waiting in the next chapter. There are moments in science when everyone knows what's supposed to happen. Moments where the universe follows the rules, the old patterns, the laws we trust. Perihelion is one of those moments. When an object swings close to the sun, it should blaze. It should roar with light as the heat tears dust from its surface. It should brighten so much that even small backyard telescopes can feel it. That's what everyone expected from 3IATLAS. A bright surge, a glowing arc, a burst of energy that would tell the world, yes, I am here. But instead, it faded. And that silence, that dimming, felt like a whisper from something that didn't want to be seen. In the days leading up to perihelion, observatories prepared like an orchestra waiting for the first note. Scientists triple-checked their instruments. Amateurs pointed their cameras to the sky. Even people who didn't care much about space felt a strange curiosity, because something was coming. Something big. And for once, the whole world seemed to be looking at the same point in the sky. But on the morning of perihelion, when the object should have burned the brightest, it didn't. It stepped backward into the dark, slipping into a quiet that felt unnatural. Imagine a singer stepping up to the microphone, opening their mouth, and instead of a voice, you get silence. A silence that feels planned. That's what happened to 3I/Atlas. The first observatory to report the dimming was in Chile. A researcher leaned forward, staring at the screen, thinking the lens had frosted over. They wiped it clean, recalibrated, tried again. Same result. The object wasn't just dimming. It was pulling its light in, like it was protecting itself. Within an hour, the same reports came from Hawaii, then Spain, then Japan. The whole world watched as brightness levels fell off a cliff. And in that moment, every chart, every prediction, every line of code they trusted was useless. Because nothing in nature dims like that near perihelion. Nothing hides from the sun, unless it wants to. By midday, the disbelief had turned into quiet fear. Some scientists tried to explain it away. Maybe it spun in a strange direction. Maybe it's shedding dust in a weird pattern. Maybe the readings are off. But everyone could feel the truth pressing against their minds. This wasn't a glitch. This was behavior. You could almost imagine the object folding itself inward, closing its surface like a flower retreating at night, as if it knew the sun was too bright, too revealing, as if it didn't want us to see what was underneath. And then came the strangest part. As the object dimmed, the space around it seemed to dim too. Sensors tracking thermal emissions felt a sudden drop. Spectrometers recorded a kind of shadow, in wavelengths usually washed out by sunlight. It was like 3I/Atlas was absorbing light, pulling the heat into itself, creating a bubble of darkness around its passing path. Not the darkness of distance, not the darkness of night. A deliberate silence. Something intentional. Something protective. Almost like camouflage. In astronomy, there's a rule. The sun reveals everything. No matter what an object is made of, no matter how quiet or cold it might be, the sun burns the truth out of it. Heat strips, dust. Light exposes surfaces. Radiation reveals fingerprints. But not this time. 3I/Atlas didn't flare. It didn't crack. It didn't behave like a comet or a rock or anything natural. It resisted the sun. It sheltered itself. Like something that had seen the sun before and didn't want the same thing to happen again. Around the 3rd hour after perihelion, the silence turned into tension. Researchers leaned closer to their screens. People stopped talking. The air in every observatory felt a little heavier. Because the longer the object stayed dim, the stranger it felt. One scientist said in a shaky voice, "It's like it's going invisible on purpose." Another whispered, "No object avoids heat like this, unless it's designed to." No one responded. Not because they disagreed, but because the idea felt too big to touch. Something hiding from the sun. Something choosing darkness. Something controlling its own brightness. Those thoughts carried a weight none of them were ready to lift. Hours passed. The object kept drifting through its closest point to the sun. Quiet, small, almost ghost-like, and the world's most powerful instruments couldn't pull anything out of it. Not a flash. Not a burst. Not a single signature of natural behavior. It was like watching an animal freeze in place when it senses danger. Still, silent, waiting for the moment to pass. And as the object slowly moved away from the sun's blinding light, something even stranger happened. It brightened, again, softly, smoothly, almost like a sigh, as if it had been holding its breath the entire time. This sudden return of light raised even harder questions. If the dimming was natural, it wouldn't restart this cleanly. If the object was outgassing, the brightness would stay chaotic. But it didn't. It went dark at the perfect moment. It brightened at the perfect moment. Like a curtain opening and closing. Like a decision. And when something from deep space behaves like it's making decisions, it forces you to rethink everything. Every law, every model, every belief about what can and cannot exist, because natural things don't hide. But something inside 3I/Atlas did. As the chapter closes, astronomers around the world stare at their screens in a mix of fear and wonder. The object is bright again, moving on, as if nothing happened. But the silence it left behind is louder than any explosion. Why would an interstellar object avoid light? Why would it hide at the exact moment the universe should have revealed it? And if it can control its brightness near the sun, then what else can it control? In the next chapter, the answers grow even stranger. There are patterns in nature that we learn to trust. The quiet flicker of a star, the random heat of a comet's surface, the natural chaos of something drifting through space for millions of years. But every now and then, something breaks the pattern, something changes the rules. And that's exactly what happened when the first infrared data from 3I/Atlas arrived, because buried inside that cold stream of numbers was a heartbeat, not a flicker, not a random burst of heat, A pulse. Slow, steady, almost alive. And that was the moment everything shifted. When scientists first saw it, they froze. Thermal emissions from interstellar objects aren't supposed to repeat. They dance. They wobble. They flicker like candlelight. But this was different. This was a rise and fall that moved with perfect symmetry, like something inside the object was breathing, holding its own rhythm, following its own clock, a cycle that repeated again and again, as if it didn't care who was watching. And suddenly, the idea that this was just a rock felt painfully small. As the data streamed in, the room grew quiet. You could almost feel the weight of the numbers pressing down on everyone there. The pulse rose for exactly the same number of seconds each time. It fell just as smoothly. No spikes, no errors, no natural randomness. Just a clean, gentle wave of heat moving through the object like a signal trapped under stone. Someone whispered, "This can't be thermal noise." But deep down, they already knew that. Noise doesn't move on a schedule. Noise doesn't loop with perfect timing. Noise doesn't imitate life. Within hours, more infrared labs joined in. Every telescope watching 3IATLAS, from high mountaintops to freezing deserts, picked up the same exact pattern. It didn't matter where the sensor was pointed. It didn't matter how strong the telescope was. The pulse looked identical. Like the object wasn't responding to its environment, it was responding to itself, controlling something inside its core, regulating it, balancing it. And that idea, that sense of inner control, sent a wave of disbelief through the entire community, because natural things don't self-regulate. Machines do. Scientists tried everything to break the pattern. New filters, faster sampling rates, different wavelengths, randomized timing, fresh calibrations. Nothing changed. No matter what tools they used, no matter how they adjusted their instruments, the pulse stayed perfect. Like it was ignoring the world and simply following a rhythm older than its journey through the stars. It pulsed the same way a lighthouse flashes, the same way a beacon repeats, the same way a message loops for anyone willing to listen. Almost like it wasn't malfunctioning, it was communicating. But no one wanted to say that out loud. Not yet. Instead, they tried to explain it away. Maybe it's outgassing we can't detect. Maybe the surface material's heating unevenly. Maybe it's interacting with solar radiation in a strange way. But each explanation fell apart as fast as it was suggested. Uneven heating doesn't produce symmetry. Outgassing doesn't restart on the same second every cycle. Radiation doesn't create gentle, measured waves of heat unless it's being controlled. And if it's controlled, who's controlling it? That question settled into every mind like a cold wind. Hours turned into a night of restless observation. Eyes grew heavy. Screens glowed in dark rooms. Charts overlapped until they looked like copies of the same heartbeat. And through it all, the pulse continued, soft, steady, unchanging. Imagine watching something that looks like a rock behave like a machine. Imagine realizing that the surface you see might only be a shell, a disguise, a mask hiding something technical beneath it. It forces you to see the object differently, not as an asteroid, not as a comet, not as debris from another star, but as something designed, something built, something pretending to be ordinary. And then came the moment no one could ignore. A researcher zoomed into the waveform, so close that even the tiniest irregularities would appear. And the pulse became even stranger. The rises weren't just symmetrical, they were mathematically perfect. The falls weren't just smooth. They matched the rises with almost zero deviation. It was like watching a machine test itself. Adjust, correct, and then repeat. Natural objects don't do that. Nature is messy. Nature is wild. Nature doesn't follow perfect timing. But this pulse did. And if something behaves like a machine, there's a chance it is one. The fear didn't come from the heat itself. It came from the questions the heat forced people to ask. If this object can pulse, what else can it do? If it can regulate heat, can it regulate motion? If it can regulate motion, is it navigating? Is it choosing its path? Is it hiding something inside? Or worst of all, is it alive? Not alive like a creature. Alive like a system. Alive like an idea. Alive like something built with purpose. A silent machine drifting through space, wearing the costume of a rock. Something designed to last longer than planets, longer than civilizations, longer than the species watching it now. A machine pretending to be a memory from another star. As the pulse continued into the night, the world outside kept spinning, unaware of the quiet heartbeat echoing across observatories. But the scientists watching it felt something deeper, a shift in their understanding of reality. Because if this was a machine, it didn't come from here. It didn't belong to our time. And it didn't drift into our solar system by accident. It arrived with intention. And now it was announcing itself through a pattern we were never meant to ignore. As this chapter closes, the pulse still beats in perfect rhythm, steadier than any natural signal ever recorded. A heartbeat in the dark. A secret beneath stone. A message repeating across the silence of space. And the question grows heavier with every cycle. Is this a machine pretending to be a rock? Because if it is, then everything we thought we knew about life, about the universe, about who might be watching us, is about to change. There are moments in science when the numbers feel wrong, not because of a glitch, not because of human error, but because the universe is doing something it's not supposed to do. And for the teams watching 3IATLAS, that moment arrived through radar. Not light this time, not heat. Radar. A method so simple, so reliable, that even the smallest mistake becomes obvious. But when radar touched the surface of this interstellar visitor, everything changed. The first reading came through at 2:14 a.m., a clean return signal, smooth, bright, almost polished. Scientists nodded. This was normal. This made sense. But 60 seconds later, the surface turned chaotic. The smooth signature shattered into spikes and valleys, as if the object had grown jagged edges in a single breath. It didn't just flicker, it transformed. And when the researchers refreshed the data, the surface returned to smooth again, as if nothing had happened. A shape-shifting echo, a surface with moods, a skin that refused to stay the same. At first, no one believed the numbers. They checked the cables, restarted systems, recalibrated everything. But the pattern repeated again. Smooth, chaotic, smooth, chaotic. Every few minutes, the entire radar signature changed, like something beneath the dust was moving, like plates shifting, panels sliding, surfaces opening and closing, not randomly, but with intention, as if the object was adjusting itself, trying on new faces in the dark. And the deeper the scientists stared at those spikes and curves, the more they realized this wasn't noise, this was behavior. More observatories joined in, more radar beams scanned the object, and every single team reported the same impossible phenomenon. The reflectivity of 3I/Atlas changed too quickly and too drastically to make sense. One moment it looked like metal, the next like dust, then like fractured rock, then like something unknown, a surface that wouldn't stay still. A skin that refused to obey nature. Imagine watching a mountain turn smooth as glass, then crack apart, then heal itself again, all in the time it takes to breathe. That's what scientists were seeing, and the arguments began almost instantly. Some said it had to be a thick layer of dust shifting with every rotation. Others said solar radiation was interacting with unusual materials. But both explanations collapsed quickly. Dust doesn't move in perfect cycles. Radiation doesn't reshape rock every few minutes. And nothing, absolutely nothing, changes reflectivity this precisely unless something beneath the surface is controlling the process. But no one wanted to say that out loud. Not yet. As the hours passed, the radar readings grew clearer and more disturbing, because the shifts weren't random at all. They were patterned. Every smooth phase lasted the same number of seconds. Every chaotic burst followed the same duration. A cycle, a rhythm, like the object was switching modes. One researcher said quietly, "It's like doors opening, then closing." Another whispered, "No, it's like panels moving." Panels, a word that doesn't belong in astronomy. A word for machines. A word that turned the entire room cold. The deeper they looked, the more the data revealed something terrifyingly precise. During the smooth phase, the radar return looked metallic, as if the object's surface had a hard, clean layer. But during the chaotic phase, the return scattered like shattered stone, as if the smooth layer retracted and exposed something rough beneath it. A shell, a casing, a protective skin, something built to change depending on the environment. A machine's armor, not a rock, not a comet, not anything natural. But the most unsettling detail came next. During one scan, the radar signature didn't just spike, it formed a shape, a regular shape, a triangular echo, sharp, geometric, something impossible to produce from random debris. It lasted less than a second, but it was enough. Enough to make the room fall silent. Enough to make every trained scientist feel a chill run through them. Space does not craft triangles on its own. Nature does not build moving geometry. But machines do. Arguments turned into debates. Debates turned into frustration. And frustration turned into something darker. Fear. Because the more they analyzed the data, the clearer it became. 3I/Atlas wasn't just changing reflectivity, it was managing it, controlling how much radar bounced off its surface, like it was choosing when to be visible and when to disappear. That's not physics, that's strategy, a defensive mechanism, a design choice, something built with a purpose. One scientist finally asked the question everyone had been avoiding. What is changing its skin? The room fell quiet. No one wanted to guess. No one wanted to be the first to cross that line. But the truth hung there anyway, heavy, unspoken, and undeniable. This object had layers, real layers. A shell that covered something deeper, something more complex, something intelligent. And the surface was not static. It was reacting, responding, maybe even protecting itself. Night turned into morning, and the radar scans kept coming. Each cycle repeated perfectly: smooth surface, chaotic surface, smooth again, like the object was inhaling and exhaling, but through metal lungs, like it was rotating panels inward and outward, testing its own systems, like it was alive, but not in a biological sense. Alive like a mechanism. Alive like an ancient machine drifting through space, still functioning after a journey no life form could survive. A machine covered in dust and stone, wearing the disguise of a harmless object. Until the disguise slipped. As this chapter ends, scientists stare at the radar patterns and feel their understanding of reality begin to crack. Because this isn't just an anomaly now. This is engineering. This is design. This is the first real glimpse beneath the mask. And the question that rises, soft at first but growing louder with every new scan, is, what is changing its skin? Because whatever the answer is, it's not natural. And it's not from here. The next chapter moves deeper into the unknown. Sometimes the truth doesn't reveal itself in a single moment. Sometimes it waits, hiding inside the small things we ignore. A wobble, a dim light, a sudden bright flash that feels out of place. Tiny pieces. Pieces too small to mean anything on their own. But when the world finally put those pieces together, something impossible appeared. A pattern. A pattern that shouldn't exist. A pattern no natural object in the universe has ever followed. And for the first time since 3I/Atlas entered our solar system, scientists felt something they hadn't felt before: recognition. As if the object wasn't just moving, it was speaking. The discovery began quietly. A late-night email from one observatory to another. A question half buried in a spreadsheet. A strange coincidence between two sets of data collected weeks apart. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic. Just a feeling that the numbers were aligned. Too aligned. And when more teams joined in, when they overlaid their months of measurements onto a single timeline, the result took their breath away. Because every shift, every wobble, every flash, each strange motion they had recorded in isolation, fit together like pieces of a perfectly carved puzzle. The adjustments in trajectory from Chapter 1, the rhythmic light curve from Chapter 2, the sudden perihelion dimming, the thermal pulse, the shifting reflectivity, all of it followed the same hidden structure, a silent order beneath the chaos, a code. The room went still. People leaned closer to their screens, not sure if they were witnessing a mistake or the beginning of something historic. One researcher traced the data on the screen with their finger, following the points, the dips, the rises. "It's repeating," they whispered. Another shook their head. "It's not repeating, it's evolving." And that made it even stranger. Because patterns in nature repeat. They loop. They stay predictable. But this pattern wasn't just repeating. It was growing. Each cycle building on the last. Each motion connected to the next, like chapters in a story only the object understood. Something was guiding this motion with purpose. Something intelligent. They ran the numbers again and again. They checked for errors. They checked the timestamps. They checked the tracking angles. Nothing was off. Nothing could explain it. Every shift in trajectory aligned perfectly with the thermal pulse. Every reflectivity spike matched changes in the light curve. Every moment of silence near perihelion connected with motions days before. It was like watching a heartbeat, a breath, a rotation, and a whisper, all synced to the same secret rhythm. Someone said quietly, "This is a system, not an object, a system." Something designed to follow rules not written by nature. What came next was even more unsettling. When they converted the motions into a visual graph, just to see it in a simpler form, the pattern looked familiar. Not familiar like a symbol or a shape, but familiar like structure, the way a computer organizes its processes, the way a machine runs cycles, the way coded sequences repeat with intention. It had sub-patterns, sections, bursts of activity, followed by periods of silence that looked more like rest than randomness, like a machine pausing between commands. And inside those pauses were tiny variations, tiny enough to hide, precise enough to matter. Little shifts that looked like data, not noise, information. As the research teams dug deeper, they found something that made their skin crawl. When they aligned the timing of the object's strange behaviors to its overall flight path, the pattern flowed like a message. At least, it felt like one. The trajectory shift from Chapter 1 served as the opening. The light curve rhythm from Chapter 2 acted like punctuation. The perihelion silence, the pulse, the reflectivity shifts. They weren't separate events. They were signals, chapters of a larger communication, a sequence, a code. And if that was true, then someone, or something, had built this object to be read. No one wanted to say intelligent. No one wanted to say artificial. But the weight of it settled in every room, every call, every meeting. Because nature doesn't leave messages. Nature doesn't hide information inside motion. Only intelligence does that. Only design does that. Something about 3IATLAS felt less like a visitor and more like a blueprint left drifting through the galaxy, waiting for someone advanced enough to recognize the pattern. And we just did. The more they decoded, the deeper the mystery grew. Some believed the object was broadcasting a warning. Some believed it was an ancient machine, still running a program from a civilization long gone. Others believed it wasn't sending a message at all, but awakening one. A trigger, a sequence meant to activate once the object reached a certain place at a certain time in a certain star system. And that idea changed everything. Because if the pattern was connected to our sun, then this message wasn't random. It was meant for here. It was meant for us. Hours passed, and the scientists watched the pattern repeat with growing dread. They couldn't read the message yet. Not fully, not clearly, but they understood one thing. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't a trick of light or heat. Every motion had a purpose. Every signal had meaning. This was intentional. And the silence that filled the room felt almost sacred, because somewhere in that code, buried inside the rhythm of an object older than our species, lay a truth waiting to be unlocked. A truth that could rewrite everything we know about life, about intelligence, about the universe. As the chapter closes, the pattern is no longer just an anomaly. It's a message written in motion, wrapped in silence, carried across the stars by something pretending to be a comet. And now, the only question that matters is the one no one can answer. What message hides inside the motion? Because whatever it is, we're not ready for it. But the next chapter takes us even deeper into the unknown. There's a moment in every mystery when the questions become heavier than the answers. A moment when the evidence stops whispering and starts pointing. For 3I/Atlas, that moment arrived here. Because after weeks of watching it shift, pulse, dim, brighten, and follow a code, scientists were forced to ask the question they had been running from since day one. What is this thing? A rock? A comet? A machine? Or something far older and far stranger? At first, the safest idea felt like the simplest one. Maybe it started as a comet, a harmless traveler, ice and dust bundled together by gravity, thrown out of its home star system and left to drift through the dark for millions of years. A familiar story, a comfortable one. But the more they studied it, the less that story made sense. Because comets don't correct their own paths. They don't pulse with heat. They don't change their skin. They don't hide from the sun. And they definitely don't follow coded patterns that look like engineered signals. So the old explanations cracked. One by one. Until the scientists were left staring at something that didn't fit any natural category we've ever known. And when nature fails, the mind turns elsewhere. That's when the second idea began to surface. A quiet theory. A dangerous one. The kind of idea no one wanted to say out loud, but everyone felt pressing inside their chest. What if it was never a comet at all? What if 3I/Atlas was built? Not born, not formed, not shaped by gravity and heat, but designed. A machine meant to cross the empty distances between stars. A machine old enough to gather dust, scarred enough to look like a rock, quiet enough to pass as debris until you look close. And when you look close, too close, the disguise falls apart. Some scientists believe the truth sat right there, hidden under layers of dust and time. 3I/Atlas didn't become a machine. It started as one, a probe, a scout, a seed, a relic from a civilization no longer alive or one still watching, a machine that doesn't decay, doesn't die, doesn't stop functioning, even after drifting alone in the dark for longer than human history. Something built to survive the cold, the distance, the silence. Something meant to endure the way only metal and intention can. But others offered a middle path, a theory almost scarier than the first. They suggested the object did begin as a comet, but somewhere in its journey, maybe millions of years ago, something found it. Something intelligent, and transformed it, upgraded it, reinforced it, turned it into a vessel, a carrier, a message in a bottle left drifting across space, a hybrid of nature and engineering, a comet wearing a machine's heart, a natural object rewritten into a purpose far beyond its original creation. And the more the scientists debated, the more uneasy they became. Because both theories led to the same question. Who touched it? Who built it? And most chilling of all, why send it here? When researchers traced the object's path backward, trying to find where it came from, they discovered something unsettling. Its origin wasn't clear. The path was too smooth, too controlled, too perfect. It hadn't been flung randomly like most interstellar debris. It had traveled in a line, a subtle, curved line, one that looked chosen, not chaotic, almost like someone aimed it, launched it, directed it, not toward the sun, but toward us. Some theorists believed the object was a message, a piece of technology built by a distant intelligence trying to reach anyone capable of recognizing the pattern. Others thought it was a scout, a silent observer sent to gather data or test whether life exists in the quiet corners of the galaxy. And then there were the darker ideas, that it might be a warning, or a trigger, or something that activates when it finds a star system with civilization, a sleeper device, a key, a memory waiting to be unlocked. And if that was true, then its arrival now, in this exact century, felt less like a coincidence and more like a countdown completing. One group of scientists raised a different possibility, one that made people shiver when they heard it. They believed 3I/Atlas might not be from an alien world at all. They suggested it could be human, not human from today, but human from a future we can't imagine. A future where our species masters interstellar travel. A future where we send machines into the past or across distances so vast that they circle back home long after we've forgotten them. A future where humanity leaves messages for itself because no one else lasted long enough to hear them. But that theory only sharpened the fear, because if it came from our future, why send it here? Why now? And what were we supposed to do with it? Every new hypothesis made the object feel less like a visitor and more like a mirror reflecting our fear of the unknown, our need to explain, our longing to believe we're not alone, our dread that maybe we are. But through all the theories, all the arguments, all the speculation, one truth stayed the same. This object was built with intention. It was engineered to last, engineered to move, engineered to hide, engineered to signal, which means it was engineered by someone or something. A mind, a civilization, a presence older than our world or waiting in our future. Something capable of doing what we can't. Something that understands the universe in ways we can't imagine. And as the world watched 3I/Atlas drift deeper into the inner solar system, its motions still coded, its surface still shifting, its silence still deafening, one question rose above everything else. A question no one had the courage to answer. If this is a machine, who sent it? And the question that followed was even harder to face. Why now? Because the universe doesn't send messages without purpose. And whatever purpose this one carries is waiting in the next chapter. There are moments in space that feel less like events and more like tests. Moments where the universe watches silently to see who understands its rules and who dares to break them. Perihelion, the closest point to the sun, is one of those moments. For any natural object, perihelion is a punishment. The heat rises, the radiation burns. The gravity tears at every crack and pore. Most comets don't survive it. They break, they tumble, they fall apart like ancient ice giving up under a star's wrath. But when 3I/Atlas reached perihelion, it didn't break. It didn't shake. It didn't even flinch. Instead, it did something no rock, no comet, no natural object has ever done before. It fired back. The first signs appeared on solar-facing sensors. A sudden spike in light, too sharp to be natural, too clean to be reflected sunlight. A burst, a flash, a controlled release of energy that looked nothing like outgassing and everything like propulsion. It was as if the object used the sun as a launch pad, like it took the heat, transformed it, and then pushed. A maneuver so precise it left even seasoned solar physicists speechless. Because nature doesn't push back against a star, but a machine could. As the object whipped around the sun, high-resolution instruments captured something breathtaking. 3I/Atlas didn't tumble. It didn't wobble. It didn't spin, out of control. Instead, it pivoted, smoothly, deliberately, like a spacecraft adjusting orientation. It angled itself as if predicting the sun's magnetic fields and using them instead of fighting them. Like it had flown this route before, like it was following a plan, a blueprint, a memory, something built with the intelligence to understand a star better than we do. When the controlled burn intensified, something even stranger happened. The thermal signature that had puzzled scientists for weeks suddenly made sense. It wasn't just pulsing before. It was charging, storing heat, building energy, preparing for the moment it would skim the sun's surface and escape out the other side. And when it released everything at once, in a silent burst no human eye could see, the object accelerated in a way only engines do. But there were no engines, no jets, no visible exhaust, no debris. Just light. Light turned into motion by something that knew exactly what it was doing. The sun is chaos. Its gravity, its storms, its plasma, its heat. No natural object survives direct exposure without tearing itself apart. But 3I/Atlas moved through that chaos like a bird gliding through a storm that should have shredded it. Every shift was calculated. Every angle was perfect. Every adjustment anticipated forces we haven't even mastered measuring yet. And as it emerged from the sun's blinding halo, still intact, still steady, still following that same coded rhythm, scientists realized something terrifying. This was choreography, a performance written across millions of miles in a language older than our species. When the data from perihelion was replayed in slow motion, a chilling detail appeared. Right at the closest approach, the point where the sun should have ripped it apart, the object flattened, not physically, not like a piece of paper, but its signature flattened, its radar profile shrank, its reflectivity dropped, its heat emission smoothed into a near-perfect line. Exactly like a machine streamlining itself to reduce drag. Drag near the sun? It didn't make sense at first. But then it did, because 3I/Atlas wasn't fighting the sun's gravity. It was cooperating with it, bending with it, riding it, using it. Like a surfer riding a wave, only they can feel. And that realization broke the last piece of doubt. This was not a comet. This was not a rock. This was a spacecraft wearing a cloak of dust and drifting through the solar system with a purpose. The biggest question then wasn't how. It was who. Who built something that could survive the most violent environment in our solar system? Who understood stars at this level of detail? Who designed a vessel that could drink light and turn it into motion? Ancient beings, civilizations older than Earth itself, or something else, something beyond biology, something that doesn't live or die the way we think life does, something that simply endures, a machine with no creator left to claim it, a relic, a ghost ship, still following a mission that began before humans walked upright. Then another theory emerged, one that shook the scientific world. What if it wasn't engineered to survive the sun? What if it came here because of the sun? What if the maneuver we witnessed wasn't navigation, but activation? A switch. A trigger, a moment the machine was waiting for. A solar-powered reset of systems that had been dormant for eons. And if that was true, then what awakened inside it as it passed that burning point? What system rebooted? What memory loaded? What command reactivated? What was it preparing for as it left the sun with more energy than it had going in. As the object slingshotted away, one last detail sealed the truth. A small course correction, tiny, precise, too controlled to be natural. It wasn't escaping randomly. It wasn't drifting. It was heading somewhere. It was choosing a path. Choosing a destination. Not a comet, not a passenger of gravity, but a pilot. An intelligence predicting the sun down to the smallest detail and using it perfectly. A mind, mechanical or something else, that understood the universe better than we ever have. As this chapter ends, 3I/Atlas emerges from the sun's shadow like a survivor or a soldier, with its mission still intact. Its surface glows faintly, its trajectory tightens, its code-driven rhythm continues, and the question that rises echoes through observatories around the world. What intelligence predicts the sun that precisely? Because whatever designed this machine didn't build it for us, but it's heading our way all the same. And what comes next is even stranger. Some discoveries don't arrive with explosions or headlines. Sometimes they appear quietly, in a line of numbers, in a strange curve, in a place where no one ever expected to find meaning. And that's exactly what happened when physicists finally decoded the motion of 3I/Atlas. Because hidden deep inside its trajectory, buried under months of data, millions of calculations and countless attempts to explain the impossible, was something no one had ever seen before. A constant, a rule, a new signature of motion that didn't belong to gravity or radiation or any natural force we know. A law older than our understanding, a law that didn't just describe 3I/Atlas, it seemed to guide it. The discovery began with frustration. Physicists kept running simulations, trying to fit the object's path into Newton's equations, Einstein's curves, modern orbital models. None of it worked. Every time they calculated its future path, the object drifted slightly off, not randomly, not wildly, just deliberately. Like it was following rules that human physics hadn't discovered yet. And when science is pushed into a corner like that, there are only two options: blame the instruments or question the laws. And this time, the instruments were flawless. It was a young physicist, someone who wasn't supposed to be leading the research, who first noticed it. He stared at the object's micro-adjustments, zooming in beyond what models usually allow, and noticed something eerie. Every correction, every wobble, every slight sideways drift followed the same ratio, a ratio that repeated no matter where the object was. Near the sun, near the earth, in empty space, or in regions where gravity should have overwhelmed it. A rhythm hidden in motion, a number buried in the drift. At first, he thought it was noise. But when he applied the ratio to the entire orbital path, the chaos disappeared. It lined up perfectly. The pattern didn't match gravity. It didn't match radiation pressure. It didn't match magnetic fields or solar wind or any known cosmic force. This was something else, a new constant of motion, a law that 3I/Atlas obeyed with the precision of a metronome, as if the object wasn't affected by physics, but was using it, shaping it, redirecting it, following a rulebook entropy has never seen. When they mapped the constant across time, something even stranger happened. It predicted every move the object made, not probabilistically, not vaguely, exactly. Step by step, shift by shift, angle by angle, like reading sheet music for a song written across space. And then came the breakthrough that shook the room into silence. One physicist plotted the constant against the curvature of space-time itself, just to see what would happen. What emerged was not a normal orbital path. It was a line curved in ways that suggested the object wasn't just riding gravity, it was bending probability, leaning into low-resistance regions, avoiding chaotic gravitational turbulence, choosing the smoothest possible thread through the fabric of the solar system. Not by luck, not by chance, but by rule, as if the object obeyed a deeper force, a force older than gravity, more stable than electromagnetism, and more elegant than mathematics as we know it. Something that guided motion in a way nothing natural ever has. They called it the constant, a hidden number that behaved like a secret hand, gently pulling the object forward. Every physicist had the same reaction. They stared at the graphs, then at each other, and felt the fear rise. Because if this constant was real, then our understanding of the universe was missing an entire chapter. And whatever built 3IATLAS knew that chapter long before we did. As more data poured in, the constant grew bolder. It appeared in the object's acceleration, its energy use, its velocity shifts, even the timing of its pulses matched the same hidden ratio. Like everything the object did obeyed one master rule. The more they zoomed in, the more impossible it became. Physics shouldn't work like this. Mass shouldn't flow like this. Energy shouldn't behave like this. And yet, it did. Perfectly. Then came the moment everyone had dreaded. The constant wasn't just something the object followed. It was something the object generated. A self-made framework. A rule of motion built into its design. In other words, this wasn't a traveler moving through physics. It carried its own physics with it. A tiny piece of a higher order. A pocket of laws that didn't belong to our universe. A mobile fragment of a deeper truth. And that raised a terrifying possibility. If this constant exists, if it governs the object, if it shapes its movement, then maybe the universe we know, with its stars, its planets, its galaxies, is only one layer, one page in a book much larger than we ever imagined. And 3I/Atlas might be a messenger from a chapter we haven't read. The debate exploded across the scientific world. Some believed the constant was proof of higher intelligence, a physics so advanced that our universe looks primitive next to it. Others argued it wasn't a message at all, but a blueprint, a map of how more evolved beings move through space, not by force, not by reaction, but by harmony, by aligning with a cosmic rule we have yet to understand, a law that feels less like a mechanism and more like a philosophy, a law that turns motion into meaning. And then the scariest idea emerged. What if the constant isn't new? What if it has always been here, hidden beneath the noise, too subtle for us to notice until something used it right in front of us? What if the universe has rules we never learned to see? Rules only the most ancient machines or the most advanced minds can tap into. What if 3I/Atlas isn't showing us new physics, but reminding us of physics we never discovered? A truth older than stars, a truth older than time. A truth we were never meant to ignore. As the chapter closes, the constant remains unsolved. The object continues its path unbothered, unbroken, moving with a grace that no natural force can explain. And physicists stare at their screens, knowing they have touched something sacred, something beyond the reach of mathematics or machines. A rule deeper than gravity, a pattern older than light, a blueprint carved into the universe by something greater than us. And now, the question lingers in every mind. Is this the blueprint of a higher physics? Because if it is, then 3I/Atlas is not just a visitor, it is a teacher. And the next chapter brings humanity closer to the truth than ever before. There are moments in history when humanity's view of the universe changes forever. Moments that feel small at first, just numbers on a screen, just light curves and radar echoes, just whispers inside observatories. But slowly, quietly, like dawn creeping across a dark horizon, everything begins to shift. And that's what happened when scientists realized the truth about 3I/Atlas. The universe isn't empty. It isn't silent. It isn't dead. It's active, alive with motion, alive with rules we haven't learned yet, alive with travelers older than our species. For the first time, humanity understood that we'd been looking at the cosmos the wrong way. We saw emptiness, but there was meaning. We saw distance, but there was intention. We saw a stranger drifting through the solar system, but now it started to feel like a teacher. The shift didn't happen in a single moment. It grew slowly, from fear to curiosity to something deeper. A sense of awakening. People around the world, scientists, students, children, even those who never cared about the stars, found themselves staring upward with a different kind of question in their hearts. Not, what is out there, but, what have we been missing? Because 3I/Atlas didn't behave like a rock. It didn't behave like debris. It didn't behave like anything natural. It followed rules no textbook explained. It obeyed forces we've never measured. It revealed a constant, hidden in its motion, a blueprint of physics, older than Earth. And once humanity saw that, we couldn't unsee it. Across universities and observatories, conversations shifted from the object itself to what it represented. One physicist said, "It's like someone opened a door we never knew existed." Another whispered, "We haven't discovered a new traveler. We've discovered a new universe." And suddenly, the idea that we were alone began to feel childish, like believing the world ends at the edge of your neighborhood. Because if something like 3I/Atlas exists, then surely it isn't the only one. Surely there are more travelers, more watchers, more ancient machines drifting through star systems, following laws of motion we haven't learned yet. Some passing by, some observing, some searching for something, and maybe, just maybe, one of them found us. But with this awakening came something unexpected: humility. For centuries, humanity told itself that we were special, the center of everything, the brightest mind in the dark. But 3I/Atlas put us back in our place, not lower, not higher, just honest. It reminded us that we are children in a universe filled with ancient adults. And maybe it was trying to raise us. As more data emerged, some researchers stopped calling the object an intruder and started calling it an instructor. Because the deeper they studied its behavior, the more intentional it seemed. Every pulse, every shift, every silence, every impossible maneuver. None of it felt hostile, just precise, measured, purposeful. Like a demonstration, a cosmic lecture written in motion instead of words. One scientist compared it to a hand showing us the outline of a map we can't read yet. Another said, "This thing isn't hiding something, it's revealing something, slowly, like we're not ready for the full truth yet." And maybe we aren't. But while the scientific world tried to decode it, something else was happening. People everywhere began to look at the sky differently. The night no longer felt like a void. It felt like a vast ocean filled with travelers we've ignored, filled with stories we've never heard, filled with routes and highways we never knew existed. Children asked their parents if stars have visitors too. Astronomers stayed awake longer, their eyes glued to screens, searching for signs they used to overlook. Even ordinary people, those who never cared about physics, felt a strange pull, a feeling that the universe was suddenly much bigger, and somehow much closer. 3I/Atlas didn't expand space. It expanded perception. It widened the window. And once the window opened, no one wanted it closed again. For the first time in generations, humanity felt small, but in a beautiful way. Small, like a child who finally realizes the world is larger than their home. Small, like standing at the edge of the ocean hearing waves that traveled thousands of miles. Small, like discovering that life might not be rare, just differently built. It was a quiet, humbling awakening. A reminder that we aren't the first, we aren't the oldest, and we aren't the only minds trying to understand existence. Then came the hardest question of all. If 3I/Atlas is a teacher, what lesson is it trying to deliver? Was it teaching us new physics? New rules of motion? A hint of how advanced civilizations travel? A message hidden in its coded patterns? Or was it teaching us something deeper, something emotional, something philosophical? Maybe the lesson wasn't about technology. Maybe it was about perspective. Maybe it was showing us that life isn't defined by biology. That intelligence can take forms we don't recognize. That time and distance don't erase meaning. That silence is not emptiness. It's waiting. The object kept moving, steady and calm, as if it didn't care about our theories, or our fear, or our awe. It just followed its path, its code, its mission. Like a teacher walking ahead on a trail, trusting the students to keep up. And humanity tried to keep up. We stared. We calculated. We questioned. We argued. We dreamed. We reached. And slowly, chapter by chapter, signal by signal, pattern by pattern, we stopped seeing 3I/Atlas as a threat. We started seeing it as an opportunity, a chance to learn, a chance to grow, a chance to understand the universe in a way humans never have. As this chapter closes, humanity stands in a moment of transformation. The stars feel alive. The darkness feels meaningful. The universe feels inhabited by minds older and wiser than anything on Earth. And the object that once felt like a stranger now feels like a teacher, guiding us toward a truth. We're only beginning to understand. The lesson isn't clear yet. But the question lingers like a whisper. What lesson is it trying to deliver? Because whatever it is, the next chapter brings us one step closer to the answer. There are endings, and then there are disappearances, moments that don't feel final, but instead feel like a page turning, like the universe inhaling before revealing something bigger. And that's exactly how the world felt when 3I/Atlas approached the edge of our solar system. Not like a visitor going home, but like a teacher finishing a lesson we're only beginning to understand. For months, it had shown us motion that defied gravity, light that behaved like language, and laws that didn't exist in any physics textbook. But now, it was leaving. and humanity wasn't ready to let go. The first signs of its departure were subtle. The object grew smaller on screens. Its thermal pulse softened. Its coded motion slowed as if it was conserving its last breath. Not dying, just preparing. The further it drifted from the sun, the quieter it became. Like someone walking down a long hallway, each step a little softer than the last. Observatories tracked it with everything they had, the biggest telescopes, the most sensitive sensors. Even backyard astronomers tried to catch one last glimpse of the visitor that had rewritten reality. But 3I/Atlas seemed almost determined to fade on its own terms, not in a dramatic flash, not in a violent breakup, but in a controlled, graceful retreat, like a ship sailing beyond the horizon. As it neared the boundary of the solar system, scientists expected one last anomaly, some unpredictable behavior, some final twist. But what they got was far stranger. A pulse. A single, perfectly timed flicker of light. Not random. Not accidental. Not noise. It was too clean, too intentional, too much like every pattern it had shown before. It was a signature, a closing statement, a final line in a story, written in motion instead of words. The pulse wasn't bright. It wasn't loud. It was gentle, soft, almost emotional, a goodbye. Sensors across the world caught it simultaneously. Every observatory, every telescope, every listening station. For one brief moment, they all shared the same spike. A perfectly shaped curve that repeated the constant hidden in its trajectory. The same constant that had puzzled physicists for months. The same pattern that seemed to hint at higher laws of motion. The same ratio that no natural object had ever followed. And here it was, echoed one last time like a reminder. One final lesson. A quiet way of saying, don't forget. Then, almost immediately after the pulse, silence. The object dimmed so fast that some researchers thought their instruments failed. But the systems were fine. 3I/Atlas was simply gone. Not destroyed, not broken. Just gone. It crossed the vanishing point, the place where sunlight fades and the solar system's pull grows too weak to hold anything close. Beyond that boundary, things don't disappear. They just become untrackable, invisible to the tools we've built, lost to the darkness between stars. It was the cosmic equivalent of stepping into fog. One moment you can still see it, the next, nothing. And yet, its absence felt heavier than its presence, because the moment the object vanished, the world wasn't left with relief. It was left with questions. Questions that echoed through observatories, universities, newsrooms, living rooms. Questions that slipped into the private thoughts of people staring at the sky long after midnight. Did we just witness something ancient, something intelligent, something sent? Did we just watch a machine older than civilizations carry out the last step of a mission we'll never understand? Or did we just witness the universe speak to us? For days, scientists replayed the pulse. They stretched it, compressed it, filtered it, turned it into sound, plotted it as a symbol. Every version pointed to the same truth. The final flicker wasn't noise. It wasn't randomness. It wasn't a natural event. It was a signal, a message encoded in light, short, simple, and perfectly shaped. The kind of message you would send to a civilization not advanced enough to understand the full language, but advanced enough to know it is a language. It wasn't meant to explain. It was meant to awaken, Outside the scientific world, people felt that awakening anyway. Artists painted it. Writers described it. Children asked their parents what lived between the stars. The sky felt closer, more alive, less empty, because 3I/Atlas didn't just change science. It changed perception. It changed the way humanity feels when looking into the night. We used to see darkness. Now we see possibility. We used to feel alone. Now we feel watched. Not in fear, but in wonder. Like something out there has been waiting for us to open our eyes. And the final pulse, that one last flicker before the object vanished, became the symbol of that awakening. Some saw it as a goodbye. Some saw it as a beginning. Some believed it was a test, a way to measure whether we were paying attention. But everyone agreed on one thing. It wasn't meaningless. It was intentional. And intention means someone or something was behind it. Something that obeys higher physics. Something that travels across star systems as easily as we cross oceans. Something patient enough to leave messages inside motion, inside light, inside silence. Something that visited briefly and then disappeared. Not because it was hiding, but because its lesson was complete. As this chapter closes, the solar system feels just a little emptier, yet somehow so much bigger. 3I/Atlas is gone. Its path now carries it into the deep, endless dark between stars, and all that remains is a new law of motion, a changed world, and a single haunting question that will stay with humanity for generations. Did we just witness the universe speak to us? Because if the answer is yes, then the next time the universe speaks, we need to be ready to answer.